continued you on April 15th, 2005 at the University of Tennessee Center for Study of War and Society with Mark Bolton and with Dave Holland. And before we broke for lunch, we were about to talk about your UT experience, but also over lunch we talked about something I meant to ask you about earlier, and that was your opinion on Robert McNamara at the time and now.
Okay. At the time, as I said earlier in the interview, I wasn't tuned in at all to what was really going on politically. Really, I heard the name McNamara, but I really didn't know. I knew he was Secretary of Defense. It wasn't until years later that I learned more about what was really going on. And part of that had to do with things that had been classified that are no longer classified, and certainly his book in retrospect. And basically what he was sharing was that there were things being done or thought that had a real impact on people's lives. But it seemed like it was more of an armchair quarterback type of thing from afar. And really, when you look at it, the policies were not real sound and cost a lot of people their lives. I guess the thing with the book is it did appear that he was too repentant in reference to that's where they were coming from. It was more a matter of fact of this is where we were coming from. So yes, I have feelings about Robert McNamara and some of the decisions that were made.
Any other of the main politicians of the 60s, including Johnson and Nixon, I mean, your feelings about them now?
Again, all of them, I think, could have made some differences, both good and bad. I realize that now, and I really, you had asked earlier in the interviews whether I paid attention to the media, and I had not. I do pay attention now, and I really have for many years, because I don't want to get blindsided. I really would like to at least try to know what's going on, even if what the information is coming out isn't maybe always accurate, but at least trying to be aware of current events.
And let's talk some about UT then, where we left off just
Sure.
before lunch. When did you get back to, well, first of all, when did you get back to the States after Germany?
I got back in July of '72, and I had already been finally accepted by the school, and came here in September of '72, and I was with the School of Social Work in their graduate program until June of 1974. I lived in Maryville with my wife, who was teaching, and basically that was what really supported during that period of time. And I commuted every day, and it was a good experience. As I had shared earlier at lunch, we had about 50 students in our class, about an even mix of men and women. Really, about 10 of the guys were Vietnam or Vietnam era, although most of us were all in country. We didn't. That was a good camaraderie, although we really didn't talk specifics about our Vietnam experiences, other than to say, where were you, when were you there? It was very superficial. In fact, in talking with a couple of the guys in the last year or so, we noted that really it helped with the transition, but we didn't really deal with the issues. The professors virtually did know that we were Vietnam vets, and that was a positive thing. I think we're sensitive of things that could push our buttons, and chose not to go there. And really, I think, if anything, we leaned over backwards to try to be accommodating. So my experience at UT was very, very positive, and I don't say that just because we're doing the interview here. It helped a lot. I think not only getting the 2-year education, and I really got a solid education, because for the first time probably in my life I studied, but the other part, it really gave me 2-year transition time. And as I think back on it, some of that period really is a blur in reference to just trying to readapt to civilian life. So for me, going back to school afforded me a chance to further my education and advance in a new career that I wanted to go in, but it also allowed me time to kind of chill out a little bit in a less stressful situation than maybe in a work situation would have been.
Did you feel that Germany got you ready? Like, was it a good buffer zone too? Was that a good policy?
Germany really was in that, again, my experience in Vietnam was really valued. I was given some responsible jobs, and I was able to use my mind even then. So I felt that had been successful for me, and I felt that was a good stepping stone to what I was going to do in graduate school. So Germany really was. Had I come immediately out of Vietnam and gotten out of the service, I think that would have been a disaster for me. I really needed time to debrief, even though I didn't know that was what was going on.
And you mentioned, was it 10 out of the 25 in your class you found veterans?
Yes.
That seems a very high proportion. Do you think that was something that was unique, or something to do with social work because they wanted to help and give back?
I think that's exactly right. I think part of it had to do with what was going on in our country at that time. There was a climate of people wanting to, but I think for those of us that were vets, it had what we had seen and what we had experienced, that we wanted to try to help people. We may not have been able to put it in words back then, but I think that's exactly what was happening, and I think that's the reason that we had so many of us that were going back. Plus the fact we were afforded the GI Bill to go back to school, so it allowed us to go back. Although it was it wasn't, as you talked earlier, it wasn't the same GI Bill that our fathers had known with World War II.
Oh yeah, because your father, you said, was able to go to
Yes.
and have a family
Yes.
which he just about supported.
Yes. Yeah.
Could you characterize that GI Bill? And I mean, how effective was it for you? Did it fulfill what you wanted, basically, in your...
It gave me some. We were trying to figure out earlier. I think it was about $250 a month I got, and that was as a married veteran. And I was considered an out-of-state student, and at that time, the tuition for UT for a quarter was either $400 or $500 a quarter. So it did allow, it paid for my tuition and it paid for my books. As far as living expenses, had I to rely on the GI Bill, I wouldn't have been able to do it. My wife taught, and so that afforded us enough money to live on.
But you said the situation was different for the in-state veterans that you knew?
Yes, the in-state veteran, the reason the tuition was higher for me, although when we look at it today's standards, it's what a bargain.
Yeah.
But for the in-state students, I think it was like $250 a quarter. So for in-state, the money that they got would have basically in 1 month paid for the tuition. For me, it took 2 out of the 3 months to do it. So it certainly wasn't making any money, but it did allow me to have the money to go to school. And I was supporting myself, or my wife and I were supporting ourselves at that time.
Did you feel in any way hard done by the fact that it was less? Were you expecting more, maybe? Or?
No, because I didn't know. You know, I really didn't put 2 and 2 together that maybe it was a better GI Bill. I was thankful that I was getting what I was getting, and I knew that I had other friends that did not serve that didn't have that. Although again, I paid already by virtue of serving.
Right.
But no, I didn't really give it much thought.
And what was the sort of veteran presence on campus at the time?
Well, as we shared earlier, I didn't know. Most of us were not walking around publicizing the fact that we were vets. Now, once again, it wasn't because we saw, or I ever saw anything here at U that was anti-military or anti-veteran. I just think many of us wanted to just get on with our lives. You know, while I was in graduate school, I grew a beard, and I've had a beard ever since then. Well, obviously, in the military, you can't grow a beard. If whatever hair I had, and I could grow it a little bit more, I would do that. So part of it was to just try to blend back in, and I think that's what many of the vets did. Probably the biggest thing was when a cold snap happened right after in the fall. And none of us had much money, so we ended up, many of us in my class, that were vets wore our field jackets. It wasn't because we were trying to advertise the fact that we were vets. It had to do with it was something warm, and we already had.
And that you mentioned earlier was the first time really that you knew how many there were.
Yes, yes.
Did you join any campus organizations or anything?
No, I didn't. And once again, I was a married student. I was 25, and I had joined all the campus organizations earlier on in my life. And I don't know if I knew enough at that point just that I needed to focus on my studies, and certainly my wife was an inspiration on that, in that she was working a full-time job, and I knew that I needed to study.
Were you ever approached by any anti-war protesters to come join the cause?
When I was on leave to go to Vietnam, there were some students at Maryville College that had approached me. They knew going to Vietnam. They knew I had some feelings about what was going on with the war, and they did approach me about speaking at a small protest rally. And I opted not to. Even though I was against the policy of war, I chose not to speak at that time.
And you graduated in '74, was that?
Mm-hmm. June of '74.
What did you do then? You stayed in the area?
Actually, I left the area.
Okay.
I really wanted to try to get my Yankee accent and go back to Pittsburgh. But at that time, it was the first gas crunch, and no employers that I thought of were going to go ahead and fly me in for interviews and stuff. And I had to start looking at places that were close enough that I could get to, that I knew I could get gas. And I ended up going for several interviews, one down in Greenville, South Carolina, and one in Columbia. My field placement, my second, the Family Service Agency. And so I applied at a couple of those agencies and ended up taking a job at a family counseling service in Greenville from '74 to '78. Now, backing up, as I indicated in the earlier interview, because of my Vietnam experience, I had wanted to work with the VA. And you could put in an application at the beginning of your graduate school, which I did. And somehow the government lost the application. I can't imagine that. Anyhow, I started trying to follow up on it when I never heard anything back, and I guess it was sometime in early spring they notified me and said, "We don't have an application, will you redo it?" And I went ahead and redid it. And at that point, with the federal applications, you could put down that you wanted to work with the Veterans Administration, with Bureau of Indian Affairs, or Federal Corrections. And my choice was working with the VA. Never heard anything back on that until probably August of '74, and they indicated in 2 weeks we want you to report to El Rio Federal Penitentiary at Oklahoma City. And corrections was not what I wanted to do, and I already had a job, so I elected and just said to them, "Thank you, but I already have a position." So I didn't even think about getting back into the federal system until years later. The first job, I did a lot parent-child stuff, parent-adolescent things, marriage counseling. It was a small agency, so I was thrown doing a lot of clinical things at a very early time in my career, and that was good because it allowed me to get my feet wet. In some ways, and I didn't really realize it, I really felt like I was 3 years behind. By virtue of going into the service, my thought pattern was that my peers had gone ahead. Some of them have they've been in the business world, or they've been doing other things, and I saw that 3 years, or a chunk of time out of my life, that I was trying to make up for. I didn't put two and two together about the fact that, yes, there were some negatives on this side, but for me, the positive side, I was far, in a way, above what I would have been had I not gone in the service.
How were other veterans as students in the class? Did they all do well?
I think so. I think the whole class, this was a group of people who, as I look back on the gang, were really motivated. They were because they wanted to be there, and I think really the whole gang did well. But I think certainly the veterans, even though we were, quote, getting money to go to school, we were there because we wanted to get that particular education.
Did you join any veteran groups in that first 4 years while you were in South Carolina?
No, I didn't start dealing with my veteran experience until the late 70s. And again, I really didn't want to own up to my veteran experience. First off, there was a bit of a climate early years that with some of the traditional service organizations that we may not fit in. And so, consequently, I didn't even broach that as far as fitting into the service organizations. And the other thing is, if I had joined a service organization, I would have had to acknowledge my vet. And at that point in time, I didn't. I put the concept together that I came back with my fingers and toes. I didn't have it that way, and I'm going to get on with my life. And it really wasn't until the late 70s that I started realizing there's some stuff here that I haven't dealt with. And in fact, a trauma point actually set that in motion. My wife and I are pet lovers, and our first dog was hit, and he'd gotten out in the road, and the next day I was with it, and it died. And all of a sudden, all this grief that I had never dealt with started coming forward. It wasn't just about our dog, although truly if there is such a thing as reincarnation, I want to come back to my house as a pet, because pets are family members. But it was a lot of stuff that I didn't even realize was there, and I thought, whoa, what is happening here? And I didn't have enough light at that point really to understand what was going on, other than the grief that I'm dealing with here is larger than what's actually with the death of my dog. And so I started to slowly look at that. And I moved to upstate New York in late 79, and late 78, and was with a couple of agencies there, and started having to deal with my Vietnam experience again. At one of the agencies I was with, it back a lot of turmoil that I had experienced from Vietnam, and that started putting me in touch with some of the Vietnam stuff and who's your enemy, this sort of thing. And I was fortunate enough that I did the first agency about 2 years, and I was fortunate enough to go to another agency for almost a year. And that was a very healing time for me from the standpoint of that 2-year period, but also from a Vietnam aspect. The director there, by the name of Marie Russo, was a great mentor, and she was older than I was. I still consider her a friend, and she really did help me with my Vietnam stuff without me. If I wanted to share something, I could, and I did. As I shared earlier, my parents always listened to me. My wife has always listened to me. But I, in that late 70, early 80 period, started to feel comfortable and started really getting tuned in with what had gone on with me. And so I started to deal with it at that point in time. I was somehow someone in the community found out that I was a Vietnam vet, and they were just setting up a county committee, look at what was going on with Vietnam veterans in the community. And one of the members knew that I had come from Greenville as a work setting, and he told me about the Vet Center program, which was a special program that was set up to work at that time with Vietnam era vets. And I had read something about it, but I remember when I read about it, I thought to myself, they were using both regular staff that were hired, but they were also using volunteers. And I remember thinking, there's no way I could ever do this, because it would be hard enough to deal with my own stuff, let alone someone else's. That was about a year before I got involved with this committee, and this particular member told me that the Vet Center program was expanding, and they were going to expand by 50 vet centers, and one of them was going to be in Greenville. And so I went ahead and I put in an application and was accepted at that point as the team leader for the new Green Veteran Center, and that's what I've been doing since October of 1981. And that really, even though I had started to deal with my vet issues a year or so before, being part of this program, again, technically, I'm dealing with other people's problems, but it does make me have to look at some of my own issues as well, which has been really good. It's allowed me to look at things. There's no way, truly, had first off, there's no way I would have even entertained in this project or being able to talk the way I'm talking had I not done the work already on some of these issues. And as you already know from earlier, there's still things that will push my buttons, and there's always going to be things that are going to push my buttons. Some of them, and when I say buttons, I mean it may make me a little tearful or reflective. No way had I not done what I've done for the last 20-some years that I would be able to do this, or even willing to do it. I might have the interest in doing it, but there's no way I could have done this.
Having dealt with veterans for so long, what are the main problems that you've found that they tend to suffer from?
You certainly, not every vet we see, and again, the Vet Center program is set up to deal specifically with readjustment issues with combat zones. Now, earlier on, in the very beginning, it was Vietnam and Vietnam era, and predominantly, again, Vietnam in country. You're looking at nightmares, you're looking at intrusive thoughts from our experience, you're talking about some numbing of some feelings, with the exception of anger. Anger seems to be the one feeling that can come out easier than others. Survival guilt issues, isolation. I know this sounds like a checklist for PTSD, but that's actually what we deal with, and that's what many veterans have to cope with. I guess the one thing that I've been struck with over the years, it truly doesn't matter what war zone someone is from. It could be one of the earlier war zones before Vietnam, or now that we've been in the latter war zones with Afghanistan and Iraq. Truly, it's the same readjustment issues, and truly, it goes back to traumas began, and long before Vietnam in civilization's history. And if you look back on this, PT may have been diagnosed for the first time in 79, 80, but we've been dealing as a society and civilization with trauma and its aftermath ever since there's been trauma. So these are things that, once again, it's not just vet issues; it's life issues as well.
So you've seen World War II veterans with a lot of the same problems?
Yes, and the gang that has served after us, they're just starting to come in, and they have some of the same readjustment issues, and they have the readjustment issues that I spoke of earlier. When we first get back, everybody that's coming out of a combat zone, it's like coming back to school. I use this in a term because we're here at the university. It's like being away for the summer and getting back into the routine when the fall starts. Now, with a combat zone, you have all these other traumas that you're dealing with, so it's not just going to another scenery, it's coping with the traumas as well. So it runs the gamut with the old gang as well as the new veterans that are serving now.
Do you think that there'd be enough people in your field to mass, I guess, the amount that might be coming in after this one?
Our mission has expanded tremendously since we first opened. In virtually all of the vet centers, we have a little over 200 veterans now, but we've had almost over 200 vet centers for close to a little over almost 20 years. The vet centers has really not changed much as far as the numbers, but our mission has, as far as picking up all these different eligibilities. We're also now doing bereavement counseling. There is a hiring now for outreach workers to work with the new gang that's coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. So we aren't making that many more vet centers, but we are expanding a little bit with the staff. One of the things I do have concern about, many of us in this program are of my vintage with Vietnam, and many of us have been in the program a long time, and we're getting older. And technically, a lot of us could retire either now or in the near future. And I guess my concern really has to do with what's going to fill the void with that experience level with all of these people in the next few years retiring. So I would certainly hope we've got new people that come on board that can learn these skills and can relate to the veterans that kept the ball from us.
In popular mythology, at least, you get the impression that the World War II vet came home, used the GI Bill, went on to successful lives and everything. The Vietnam veteran comes home, has all these problems, unable to function. I mean, based on what you've seen in veterans, how much does that hold up? I mean, overstated? Or?
I think certainly the Vietnam vet, we'll start with the World War II vet. They had some of the same issues, but they dealt with it differently. And certainly the media, what was going on with the media during Vietnam, and shows portray us as the deranged Vietnam veteran, certainly did not help our stereotypes. 80-90% of the Vietnam vets that came back, we had readjustment issues, but we dealt with it not from the vet going to go down the block and shoot someone. We dealt with it in some of the same ways that the World War II vets and veterans before that dealt with it. Again, there was a stereotype, though, that we were different. In many respects, we're all the same. So
you've worked with veterans from more recent wars. Do you
Yes.
see a lot of the same there? The first Iraq War, Somalia, things like that?
Those are vets that we've seen as well, and the veterans that are serving in Iraq, and I haven't seen that many from either Afghanistan or Iraq at this point, but the ones we've talked with are having some of this, are trying to readjust and having some difficulty with it.
How did you react to the recent Iraq War?
It has made me have to revisit some things from my Vietnam experience of whether or not we should be in different places, and I've had to come to some terms with that. It's made me have to re-examine some things. The media coverage on it, and watching our new casualties, watching the troops leave and the troops come back, has certainly put buttons for me and really made me much more aware and tuned into things that had happened with myself 30-some years ago.
In what respect? What is it about the media that strikes
when
you?
I see folks leaving, when I see them coming back, I can see me. We haven't had that much of a mass deployment like this. There's been the issue of whether we should be there or not there. Again, it takes you back to some of the issues with Vietnam, of policies of whether it's the right thing to do, whether everything's been being told that needs to be told. So I've had to revisit personally some issues that I had visited many years ago.
With the recent elections, John Kerry, he was big back in, I guess, the veterans movement in the 70s. What did you feel about him, the way that the media portrayed him?
Again, I think anybody has a right to express what they think and feel about a war. The key is that you make a real distinction between the politic and the warrior. And again, from the political aspect, this was one of the first times in an election that we've had a Vietnam veteran and someone that served in the reserves during the Vietnam era that was up for election. So it brought a lot of the Vietnam issues back into the forefront. It wasn't even just about the candidates; it was about issues that got revisited that we had grappled with to some degree years and years ago.
We realized how much of an issue it was.
Yes, yeah, I was. Years and years ago, people were quiet about the Vietnam issue, and now the issue is coming more to the forefront. And again, that may be because of some of the things that are happening in military situations across the globe. But it really did bring some things to the forefront that had not been discussed for many years.
Now, you did eventually start to join the Veterans Organization, as
Yes.
you indicated.
Yes.
How's that experience been?
It's been positive.
Yeah.
I belong to all of the service organizations, and it's a positive experience. And actually, the veterans from the Vietnam era have taken on different leadership roles. Now, I personally haven't, because again, of the job that I do of keeping it separate from the service organizations. I've been participating with different projects and that sort of thing. But it's been a positive experience. And the veterans that I've met since I've been involved, regardless of what era they were from, have always been very, very welcoming. And as I said earlier, I'm okay about acknowledging and so that certainly makes a difference. Whereas earlier on, I may not have been as comfortable with my own vetness, having nothing to do with anybody else.
You mentioned over lunch as well, going up to the Vietnam Memorial for the first time in Washington. Could you describe what that was like the first time?
I had an opportunity to go to the dedication in November of 1982. Didn't know what to expect. I'll tell you a story about that. When I was in upstate New York, and I was not working with veterans at that point, I remember it was a snowy winter day, and I got a letter in the mail. It was a Saturday, gone out to get the mail, and I remember going back in and opening up the mail, and there was a letter from the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Fund telling me that they were going to build a memorial and that they were needing contributions. And I remember reading it, and I remember thinking, that's great that they're going to recognize the veterans that have died. But I didn't make a contribution at that time. And as I thought back on that many years later, I really wasn't coming still to terms with my feet. It wasn't about the money. It was about, if I contributed to it, I would have to be part of it. And at that point, I still wasn't. It wasn't there. Now, over the years, I've certainly contributed to the memorial and other projects. But once again, I wasn't ready to go there. We did have the opportunity to go to the dedication. I think I've gone maybe 10 times now over the last 20 years. I think it's a great thing. It's never going to bring back the men and women that paid the ultimate sacrifice, but it does show you that these people, they had names, and when you start looking at how many of these people paid the ultimate sacrifice, I mean, over 8,000. It's a lot of people.
And you didn't know what to expect when you first went up there?
No, I had no idea what to expect.
What was your impression of it?
You know, it was interesting. We got there the day before the dedication, and my vantage point when it was dedicated was I was actually on top of the wall in a section designated for some vets that couldn't really get out in the crowd. And so my vantage point for the ceremony was to look from above an out crowd, and I could see a little bit of the wall. And then they had the massive crowd behind like a snow fence until the ceremony was over. And I remember I knew where several of my friends' names were, and I remember having the opportunity after the ceremony, because of where I was at, I had a quicker vantage to get down to there. And I remember taking a couple quick pictures and leaving. I had been to the wall, and it wasn't until later that night that I went back, and I really visited the wall, and had a chance to say hello to some friends and good to some friends. And it's always been a powerful experience. I think for any of us that have lost friends in a war zone, you'll never forget them. And I certainly have never forgotten anybody that I knew.
And you have one son, is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Has he ever shown any inclination to go into the military? Or?
None.
No?
None.
I guess you've never pushed him either.
No, I haven't. But a funny story, when he was younger, he thought that actually parents could sign up their kids, and he thought that we would sign him up. And
it's a grant to hold over his head. Yeah.
First off, that's not how it works,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
You know, from very early age, at age 4, when I came into the Vet Center program, because of my work, because confidentiality, he specifics, but he knew the type of work that I did. and he knew what the aftermath of war was. So I think at a very early age he had a much more of a realization of what war can do to people.
Have you always been able to talk to him about it? Have you ever?
Yes, I have, and probably more than he ever wanted to hear, but yeah, I have been able to talk with him about it.
Well, what is your opinion of the war now? Now that you've had time to reflect and seen what it's done to so many people? It's a huge question.
Yeah, it is a huge question. Once again, I'm very proud of being a veteran. I'm very proud of serving in Vietnam, even though I had some real misgivings about the policies. And I'm very proud to be part of the veteran population that served, not just in Vietnam, but across the board. I hope we've learned some lessons from Vietnam. I guess that's the things is not to just have an event and then go on and never evaluate. I think we need, as a country, at how it impacted us and how it impacted the world. And I would hope, and I think that's part of what's come out of the Vietnam generation. If maybe the Vietnam vets had not had such a difficult time, and had we blended in the very beginning, quite frankly, in many respects the Vietnam vet has walked point in regard to acknowledging readjustment issues from traumas from war, and not just point for the new guys coming after us and the new women after us, but for the gang that served before us, and to say, look, you can't send someone into a combat zone and not expect them to be effective. I remember a number of years ago my mother saying to me, your father and I knew that you would be changed by your experience in the war, but we didn't know what the changes would be, and we didn't know that the changes would be so long-lasting. And I think that's the thing, that when you send people into a trauma, of understanding that they're going to be affected in ways and in bad ways from that trauma. As I shared, there's some things that I still deal with, just as any vet has to deal with. And yet overall, I hope I'm a much better person than I ever would have been had I not had the experience. Whether I use the better, a different person. I certainly am a different person because of that experience.
I have a question. Do you think that the media portrayal of today's war is a better portrayal of how you all were portrayed in Vietnam and how they portrayed the war in Vietnam?
The warrior at this time, I think the distinction is the warrior at this time is being treated differently than the warrior during Vietnam. If you look now, we had a lot of media attention during Vietnam. Now you have even much more, and it's for, you can turn on the news 24-hour a day, 7 days a week, and people see things live and in front of them that maybe several days or weeks to come to view. So people are watching firefights right as they're specifically happening right then. So the media is different than it was during that period of time.
I guess that's all the questions I have. Is there anything you wish that would have asked you, or anything we've missed?
In what, 5 hours?
Yeah, 5 hours. It's not too bad.
We hit a lot. I can't think of any. It's hard sometimes to put some of this into words.
Yeah.
And even though I knew that we were going to do this, I really didn't know the questions that we were going to ask. And quite frankly, even if I had, I don't think it would have made any difference as far as any of the responses that I would have had. I think that this project is extremely important, not just for my story. My story is just a drop in the bucket, but the legacy that we as veterans have, and about the trauma work. For people not to just realize that there's trauma in war, but there's trauma in life. And for people to realize that when you react to those traumas, you aren't mentally ill. You've gone through a really rough time. And for people, it can be kind of like the tsunami survivors, or the survivors of 9/11. We as a country with 9/11 witnessed this, and we were traumatized by it. It's okay to have reactions to these things, and it doesn't just go away. Some of these things will be with us until the day we die. And I think that's part of maybe the legacy that we've been able to give as veterans to the human race, is to say trauma in all of our lives, and it changes you, either to some degree for the short term or in many respects for the long term. So I hope maybe that's something that we've given not just to the veteran population, but to society as a whole.
Well, it's been a wonderful interview, and we appreciate you sharing your time. And
Thank
coming
you.
here, so
I
thank you very
appreciate
much.
it, guys. I
Thanks a
really
lot.
do.
Thanks.